So my name is Cassie. I have been an IBCLC for 12 years, and then I was a breastfeeding peer counselor with a WIC program for 4 years before that. So I have a long experience in lactation.
And an IBCLC is kind of like the graduate degree, right? I mean, it's a lot of training.
Yeah.
It means you've worked with a lot of people. It means you've done a lot of classes, a lot of reading, a lot of training in lactation, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
you are very much an expert in all aspects, right? So just the basics, the how-to, the fundamentals, which is what we're going to talk about today, but then also, clinical level of when stuff goes wrong, you're the person to call. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love that you're here with me to talk about this because I know very little about breastfeeding besides my own experience and a little bit just kind of absorbing the information because I work with so many IBCLCs at Breastfeeding Success, including you. And I always love talking to you. And so I was just remembering what it was like to be brand new at this with my own babies. And I didn't take a breastfeeding class before I started. And I had certain expectations, like what I thought it would be like. And then that was all challenged because it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And so really what I'm hoping to get from this blog post and from this conversation is just a general idea of what people can expect when maybe they have never breastfed before, maybe never even seen someone breastfeed before. And I know that there are a lot of people in this situation. So what can you tell us about breastfeeding for the first time, how to do it?
Yeah. I feel like it is such a big question and so multifaceted, but I think a general idea is that we are both relying on some natural instinct of both the birthing parent and the baby, and also some learned skill from both parties, the baby and the parent. So I feel like ideally in an uneventful delivery, meaning that everything went really smoothly, baby's going to come out and go right on your bare chest, skin to skin. And that's where we would leave baby completely uninterrupted for 1 whole hour. We really honor that. Skin to skin is incredibly well researched and can really help kind of get things going, doing that skin to skin. And so when baby is skin to skin, their hands and their feet are free to be able to kind of utilize again those natural instincts that they have to try to find their way to the breast. There are a lot of things that happen during pregnancy that really prepare the body to prepare to breastfeed, and some of those things are the darkening of the areola, the protruding of the Montgomery glands. These things help the baby be able to find their way to the breast, and so we are kind of relying on a little bit of natural instinct from the baby to find their way there. And then from there, I mean, we're really going to just kind of support them and kind of show them how to attach to the breast. So that might mean that we need to just kind of help shape or maybe support the breast. And then just, wait for that wide open mouth and then just kind of put the baby on there would be ideal. From there, really, we want the baby to do just some active suckling. We really want the nipple to go pretty deeply into the baby's mouth, right at that soft palate in the very back of your mouth. We want it to be nice and deep back there. And how we achieve that is just, again, really waiting for that wide open mouth to bring the baby in closely.
Well, my nipple's not that big. So
yeah. Great point. So it's because we want to remember that this is breastfeeding, not nipple feeding. And so we really want a lot of that breast tissue to be able to be drawn into the baby's mouth. So we really want the baby to, again, have that wide open, I actually have a breast here, this wide open mouth to really draw as much of that breast tissue in there as they can to make it comfortable.
So it's not just the nipple going.
Right, exactly, right.
Okay, good. So the baby is attaching, holding on. You would call that the latch, the way they attach to the breast with their mouth, and that's important.
Uh-huh. So if the baby latches shallow, then they're really just kind of shoving the nipple to the roof of the mouth, and that creates like a pinching sensation. And that's often, if anyone ever says that breastfeeding was painful, it's usually that the baby wasn't on there deep enough to that all the way to that soft palate, and so there was some compression happening that was uncomfortable. It should always be comfortable, and the baby should, again, that nipple should be very deep in the baby's mouth.
Okay. Are there any tricks for encouraging a baby to get on there right?
Yeah, I some of my favorite things are really just shaping and supporting the breast. So we always want to think about helping helping the baby get that big mouthful, and how we can achieve that is like if we're eating a sandwich, we would compress the sandwich and then take a bite. But when we eat a taco, we don't come at it like this. We turn our head and our hands so that our fingers are parallel with our lips. We want to do the same thing for the baby. So we really want to sandwich the breast in the direction of the baby's mouth. So depending on how or where you're holding the baby, you're just going to want to look and kind of notice where the baby's lips are and then compress the breast in that direction. And you're basically just creating a sandwich for them. You want to make sure that your hand is placed deeply in the breast and not too close to the nipple or the areola. Because see here, when I kind of compress, I'm not leaving room or space for the baby to grab on. So we want to come deeply into the breast so that way the baby has plenty of space and room to attach to the breast. But we're just going to kind of sandwich or compress the breast. And again, wait for that wide open mouth and then just kind of shove the baby in there.
Okay. So sometimes the babies get it figured out, but if they don't, and if it pinches or if it seems like they're only holding onto the nipple, we can help them by doing the little squish sandwich thing. Okay.
Exactly. And if it ever hurts, always take the baby off by sticking your finger in the corner of the baby's mouth, break that seal, and then try again.
Okay, great. So once the baby is on there and they're suckling and doing the right thing, we feel it when the milk is coming out.
Yeah, so it should feel like a pulling or a tugging sensation. It isn't uncomfortable. It's just like, oh yeah, I do feel that. Again, just a pulling or a tugging sensation. Some people do report feeling the about 2 to 3 minutes into the feeding, your body is going to have this nice little oxytocin release where that milk just kind of comes pouring out of the breast. It kind of comes out almost like a spray when the oxytocin does its job to help the milk come out of the breast. Some people do report feeling that, but not everyone. Like some people notice the milk coming out of the breast and some don't. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything in either direction. It's just that some people feel it and some people don't. Both
Yeah,
are normal. Mhm.
it's been a while. My kids are 12 and 15, but I do remember a tingle. I remember feeling
Yeah.
a tingle. Um, and something that surprised me was that spray. I
Mhm.
pictured just like one hole in the nipple, right? And milk sprays out this one hole. But then the first time I saw milk spray out when there wasn't a baby there, and it was more like, a shower head, a rain shower head, that surprised me a lot. There are many holes in the
Uh-huh.
nipple that the milk comes out of.
Yes.
I was also surprised that it took a while, right? I pictured there just being like a big pool of milk in there somehow. And then as soon as the baby starts sucking on it, that they suck the milk out of this pool of milk. I pictured like a little straw. They just kind of suck it out. But that's not how it works.
No. I like to imagine the inside of the breast almost like a bundle of grapes. That's my favorite analogy. And so if we imagine that the grapes themselves are what house the milk, and then the stems are where the milk passes through inside the breast, and then the nipple is just the exit. And then again, like you were saying, the nipple does have many holes where the milk just comes out. Um, but yeah, and so then oxytocin kind of compresses those grapes, if you will, and kind of pushes the milk through the stems and then it exits through the nipple.
Okay. And then we have to make some more milk.
Yeah, the body is continuously making milk. So the breast is never empty. The body is always continuing to produce milk. It's similar to the saliva in your mouth. You could never swallow all of your saliva because there's always more being made. It's the same idea inside the breast.
I've never thought of it that way. Okay, so how are you supposed to hold the baby? Because I know, here's my baby. I know I always, pictured this, right? Holding the baby in
Mhm.
this kind of I guess you can't see me, but you know. So holding the baby like this and breastfeeding,
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
that the ideal position? Is that the best way to do it? What do you think?
So what I tend to do is however you naturally or intuitively like hold and support the baby, I tend to just kind of adjust from there if necessary. But some of the most common positions are, so that is what we would call the cradle hold, and that's where we're holding the baby kind of in our arm like this. And I think we tend to lean on that because every breastfeeding painting or piece of art that you've ever seen, it has the Madonna and child, right, where the baby's like that. So I think we subconsciously just feel like that's the way.
Yeah.
And for some people, maybe it is, but I do like to give newborns, especially a little bit more support. So what I usually encourage is we want the ears, shoulders, and hips to all be in a straight line, and your palm in between the baby's shoulder blades here, fingers below the ears, and then booty in the elbow here. And then this is called a cross cradle hold. But see, I have complete control over the baby's head. Whereas here, I'm trying to latch the baby onto the breast using my elbow. And newborns, well, they're very capable. They are a little wobbly, and so they are going to need a little support typically. And so if I can support them using my hand, it tends to make it a little bit easier. So this is my favorite position, but not everyone feels the same. Not everyone loves this position as much as I do. So if you notice that you tend to default to this cradle hold position, I feel okay with that. But what I encourage is just get the baby on there, nursing well, and then kind of relax into that position.
Okay. And so when you do that cross cradle position, you can sort of control what's going on with the breast. If you need to make the sandwich.
Exactly. So this hand here, we're going to shape and support the breast, and then this hand here is bringing the baby in. Great point.
Okay. And then, there's a lot of other positions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you know, like you said, how are you most comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's, the laid back position, or when you first give birth and the baby is just, skin to skin on, your belly. A lot of different ways to hold the baby, depending
Mm-hmm.
on your comfort, depending on the baby, depending on if there are any issues, right? Certain things.
Yeah. So the laid back position is actually one of my absolute favorites because so this would be the position that you would be in, right? Typically after birth, you're kind of laid back at this incline, and then baby would kind of just be laid across your body, whether diagonally or kind of up and down. Both are common. But from here, when we're belly to belly like this, and the baby is kind of face planting it onto your body, they really have their access to their hands and feet so that they can try to find their way to the breast. And they also just tend to latch a little bit deeper because when they open that mouth and they're kind of face planting it, they can just get more of that breast tissue in there. So I really love that position after birth. But also if babies are just having a hard time latching, I almost always just kind of get them in that position because I really think it triggers some of those feeding reflexes that newborns have. That's one of my favorites. Yes.
Okay. That's great. So there's a lot to know. And of course, you teach our Breastfeeding 101 class, which is
Mm-hmm.
a class that people can take while they're still pregnant and expecting their babies soon, where you can learn a lot of this stuff, more about positions and more about everything that we're going to sort of just kind of skim
Gloss
through
over.
here. But yeah, definitely encourage people to take a class if you can, because this is not, a full class. And also your Bosom Buddies group, which meets on Mondays virtually. And that's a free support group. So people can come and learn some tips if things, if they need a little help with a certain thing, or just to hear how other people are doing too. So that's good. So, but there's a lot to know there. And so what's the recommendation for how long to feed the baby each time?
Yeah, so typically I encourage just throwing your clock out the window. Don't focus too much on the clock and just focus on your baby. A good rule of thumb is that we want to feed the baby on demand, which means as often as they want to, but we don't want to go longer than 3 hours between attempts to breastfeed. So just make sure that we're offering the breast often and giving the baby a lot of opportunities to try to feed. And then from there, I think anything from 15 minutes 10, 15 minutes to 30, 45 minutes, anywhere in that window could be normal for a newborn. Um, that does tend to get shorter as the baby gets older and just more efficient and better at breastfeeding. The length of time tends to get shorter because babies just get more efficient at the breast. But for a newborn, I would say anything from 10 to 30, 45 minutes could be normal. And then as far as like switching sides, I usually encourage feeding the baby on one side until they seem like they're losing interest or they're starting to fall asleep, and then take them off, give them a nice burp, and then go ahead and switch sides. But think of it as like main course and then dessert. So if they take dessert, great. If not, that's okay too. Then at the next feeding, we're going to start on the dessert side. So that way each breast is getting an equal amount of attention.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so they get better at it, and then they just get all their food out more quickly. And so it will get easier. Does it stay pretty consistent even with newborns? Are they going to kind of have this pattern that's the same every day? Should you expect that, or is that going to change as far as how often they want to eat, how long they're going to eat?
Yeah, so the pattern typically changes based on what's going on with the baby. So babies that are going through growth spurts, or if they're having big, growth, brain development, tend to nurse more often or do what we call cluster feeding, where they tend to be a bit more ravenous. That usually lasts for like 24, 48 hours or so. And then it will stretch back out to that every 2 to 3 hours, typically. But all babies have different patterns and rhythms, and I think it's always ideal to just follow whatever their natural rhythm is.
Okay. And so when they start acting like they want to eat around the clock all the time, and you feel like you can't get anything else done, that's normal?
Absolutely, especially in the newborn period. That as they get older, that does get a better, again, because they just get better at breastfeeding, and so it's a much shorter amount of time. But yeah, I feel like in those early days, especially, as long as we're seeing adequate diapers and the baby is gaining weight appropriately, if we're seeing those two things and the baby just wants to nurse often, it's usually very normal.
And it's even, from what I understand, that's even an important part of like keeping up your milk supply, right? Because the more they're on the nipple, the more they're trying to draw milk out, the more quickly we make milk and the more milk we make. So when they're growing and they need more, they're telling us that, right? And
exactly.
so then we can keep up with their needs. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the more that the breast is emptied, that's how your body knows to make more. So we want to be emptying the breast often, so that way the body will continue making it. Absolutely.
I remember just a lot of people feeling like, this must mean my baby is not getting enough milk from me. They keep asking for more. There must not be enough. So maybe I need to supplement with bottles, whether it's pumped milk or formula. But a lot of times that's not the case, right? A lot of times it's just like, we just kind of have to power through those times, and maybe try to just relax and call it a time to catch up on watching our Netflix shows or whatever it is, because this is just part of making more milk, and it'll.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think as long as we're seeing adequate diaper output and that the baby's growing and gaining weight well, if those two things are both happening and the baby's nursing often, then I would call it absolutely normal. And it's okay to just curl up in bed. A lot of it is us giving ourselves permission, right? Like, I think we think, that we need to be doing all these extra things like laundry and dishes, when in reality, our most important work is actually just laying in bed with our sweet babies and feeding and being skin to skin. And
yeah, I see that now, but it was really hard at the time. I remember that being hard for me. Like, if I try to take this baby off my breast, she's going to scream and she's going to be really unhappy. So I'm kind of just stuck here. And I remember seeing it as, I'm stuck here and this just is driving me crazy. But I kind of wish now that I could go back and tell that me, that this is okay. This is an important part of creating that great milk supply that's going to make things easier in the long run, and try to enjoy it. Try to understand this is work that you're doing right now. And it's important work. So Yeah, but it can be hard and it can be really frustrating, especially if you're like me and you have trouble sitting still for too long.
It's so temporary too. It's such
Yeah,
a short amount of time in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, yeah.
It's hard to keep that perspective
It can
though.
feel like a lot. Yeah, definitely would get frustrated. But. Okay, so that's good, normal stuff. And you already mentioned kind of how you know baby's getting enough. It's because of the diapers and weight gain. So yeah, because we can't see how much they're getting, right? It's not like doing a bottle. We just have to watch for other signs. So that's a good one to know. And I think mainly just the last question that I would have would be, how do you know if it's not working well? Like you told us kind of how to know it is working, right? If they're
Mhm.
making plenty of wet and dirty diapers and they're pretty happy and they're gaining weight, but how about if it's not working? How would we know?
Yeah, so some things that would that come to mind for me would be any pain or discomfort that you're feeling. So, if we're experiencing any nipple pain um, or breast pain, then I would definitely reach out to a lactation consultant at that point. If baby isn't having enough wet and dirty diapers, if we're not seeing an appropriate weight gain, so you take baby in for your pediatrician follow-ups and baby's not growing, those would all be signs that we need to lean in on some support. But I think, any pain or discomfort would be the first thing that you might notice, and wet and dirty diapers.
Okay. Okay. And so is there any amount of pain that's acceptable or normal or just always a red flag?
So I would say if when baby first latches, the initial like 20 seconds or so, you might be like, ooh, but then after about 20 seconds, it should just feel like a pull or a tug. If it lasted beyond 30 seconds, then I would consider that to be a red flag. But if it's just that initial 20 seconds or so, that is pretty common and very temporary and does get better with time. But if it was hurting throughout the whole feeding, then I might be a little more concerned.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Just really, besides following up that, we do have your great class for people expecting and wanting to know more about breastfeeding in preparation for having a new baby, and then our resources for how to help people when maybe they're struggling a little bit, because
Mhm.
it's really normal. It's really normal. Like you said, babies have all these great instincts for how to breastfeed, and we have some, but really, I think most of us learn by doing. We learn by
Mhm.
learning from other people, watching other people, and so it's very normal to need a little help. And so
Absolutely.
we have you do telehealth visits for us. We have in clinic lactation support. We have our Central Texas area clinics. Of course, we have lactation consultants in hospitals. Definitely take advantage of that while you're in the hospital, right? Your group on Mondays, Bosom Buddies, is a great one. So visiting our website to see about how to get onto that one. What
To
else?
add to that, Bosom Buddies, because it is online, you don't have to be local to join that. So we do have lots of moms from all over the country actually that join. So because this will be online, I think that's important to note too, that you don't necessarily have to be local to Central Texas to receive support.
That's great. And that families should receive lactation care. It should be covered, right, by
Absolutely. Hmm.
insurance. Breastfeeding Success will submit those claims to insurance companies. We're in network with a lot of big ones, but wherever you can get support, even if they don't submit it for you, you can usually get reimbursed, right? In most cases, right? You shouldn't have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think we're doing all of the billing like on our end. And so typically the mamas or the birthing parent is not seeing a bill from us, right?
Yeah. But even if you're not with us, even if you're in Washington State or wherever,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah. So
can,
we can do telemedicine support for out of state. Absolutely.
yeah. So that's great. I think it's just good to know that is a covered benefit for pretty much everybody. And so don't hesitate to get lactation support from an IBCLC. A lot of times that's the best way to get it covered because they are the clinical specialists. And so if there was going to be any struggle getting it covered, an IBCLC is a more guaranteed way to go as far as that goes, right? From what I
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else.
Great. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Alex.
Kathy.